We have Louise Ward with us to discuss the entire saga of Castration movie as it currently exists in, I believe, four parts.
That's amazing.
Thank you so much for allowing us to interview you and giving us some of your time. I want to start with the most clickbaity question first, obviously.
Yes, of course.
And this may be, I don't know, maybe it's just clickbait to me because I'm a nerd, but I would love to discuss with you the state of indie and specifically DIY indie cinema being used as like our get out of jail free card because of the Warner Brothers and Paramount merger. I've heard so much discussion about how the way the solution we're gonna have is we're all just gonna make indie films with our friends. We're gonna go out and make indie films with our friends and it's gonna save the industry. And I have done so much research on the process and read so many of your Substack statements as a director about how difficult this process has been, specifically in terms of financing, and that you'd also mentioned for other projects that you'd had issues with financial constraints of selling rights in other territories.
Yeah.
I'd love to have your opinion on, especially considering you now, to me, at least in my circle, you're like a titan of DIY indie cinema right now. It's like, oh, the Castration movies, like we should all be doing that. How do you feel about the state of the industry, but specifically as someone who's managed to get this to work on some scale, whether that's a solution?
Yeah, so I mean, just to speak to myself as a like filmmaker, where I found my first like level of inspiration for DIY was within two spaces. One of which was the underground horror community. So I was coming out of like growing up in rural Alberta and Saskatchewan, so like kind of middle, very like Midwestern Canada. That's sort of where I found community, both like my film community and also a lot of my early queer community was in these like sort of like weird underground film spaces where it was like meeting all the other like sort of like very weird artistic types. And it was kind of filtered specifically through like horror movies because that was definitely like my interests at that age, and going into sort of this like realm where I was being exposed to movies like that were made in that same way of like group of friends, very limited budgets. But that sort of started to like dry up and was also like I've spoken in other places about kind of like the political affiliations of underground horror and how, especially leading up to like the 2016 Trump election, I started to like migrate away from that space because I suddenly, as a queer person, was finding, a space that, on the surface seemed to accept people who are all quite different, maybe wasn't as safe as I thought it was.
Yeah.
So there was like that level of it, but what drew me into that space was like the sort of like underground distribution network where you were kind of making these like direct to audience movies where like the audience was so small that you could keep the budget like under $100,000 on these like weird underground horror films, and then you could like literally just be selling Blu-rays directly to like the audience where like our first movie, Computer Hearts, I made it for $5,000. All went into the special effects budget, and I think maybe $500 on pizza or whatever.
You
To
got to
feed our
do
crew.
good crafty. That's the key to indie
It's
cinema.
most important. I mean, like especially when you have blood spraying all over the walls, it's very exciting at that moment for the pizza guy to show up. It's an important moment in any indie filmmaker journey.
Yeah.
So like we posted link like we made our own Blu-rays because this is like 2014, 2015, and we were literally able to go on Facebook like whatever like Facebook groups because Marketplace didn't exist yet at that time, but it was like Facebook groups and go, hey, DM me to buy a Blu-ray of our new movie, and we broke even on that film within like a few months of selling Blu-rays. I mean, it's a really small movie; it's 5,000 Canadian dollars. But that was kind of where I learned that like very direct to like direct, that direct line between like the community I was making these movies with and the community who was going to be our audience.
Yeah.
The second type of filmmaker I was inspired by at that time was like the mumblecore movement because we were suddenly seeing.
Yes, yes.
I was suddenly like the thing was like South by Southwest had become this amazing hotbed for movies to premiere at, where you could see movies made by Swanberg and the Duplessis and like Dance Party USA and all this stuff that is like very much in the DNA of like both Computer Hearts, which was me going, what if I made a mumblecore horror movie, to like what I'm doing now is very much so in that sort of like, like get together with your friends and build film community from the ground up, where it's like we're gonna kind of share in this like filmmaking process as a group. And a festival like South by Southwest grew and became a major powerhouse of a film festival because of it being like a realm to discover a lot of these like DIY type films. Like, Sundance was already a place where it was starting to move past the discovery of these sorts of movies. So South by became the big discovery film festival for a while.
Yeah, I was gonna say for
Yeah.
a while I fear it was also partially migrating to this kind of big indie model maybe.
Well, that was what I was going to say. Now, where we're at, Castration movie is definitely not taking the mumblecore route. Like, we are premiering Castration movie chapter 3, this like first chapter from the third part of Castration movie at BFI Flair, and this is the first of any of these movies to premiere at a film festival.
Oh,
And
wow.
yes, so everything else was online first. This is the first time that we're hitting up a festival first, which I was actually like very hesitant to do, but we basically basically my team convinced me like, hey, let's just separate this one chapter that is like feature length and let's do a festival run with it just so we can expose the movie to people who aren't already in our online audience. And of course, I'm all about, getting more people to see the movie, so that works with me. But for me, it was really like to loop this back to your original question about the Paramount Warner merger. I think that the traditional institutions in general that like, a movie like The Duplass's Baghead could premiere at South by Southwest. It can be this movie that has like the Duplasses and Greta Gerwig and all these like amazing titans of what was DIY cinema, indie film at that time in it. And it could be bought by Sony Pictures Classics and get a DVD in a limited theatrical release, even though it's like, like a movie that nowadays, like just would never find that audience. It
Yeah.
would never play at South by Southwest. It would never play at Sundance. It would never be a movie that would find like legs
Yeah.
to actually grow and travel. Castration movies kind of, I think, not the first in a wave of internet cinema, but kind of like the boldest example of like making something that in a traditional model would never find an audience. It would never persist for the years it has since like we put it online like 2 years ago, like the first part of it. So it kind of is a perfect case study to show off just like the way that the ecosystem has changed around these DIY projects. And so I don't think like the Paramount Warner merger is something that we are going to see DIY cinema responding to specifically. I think that it's just one of many ways in which the industry is changing and conglomerating. I mean, like, Penske Media, I think, owns South by Southwest now, and they're certainly not.
No!
I think they do.
That
And they,
is that is such dreadful news. If anyone,
yeah.
if like for the people that know what a Penske even is, it's like IndieWire, and then we lost the Golden Globes, and we're just losing more and more to the Penske. That's
Yeah,
very sad news.
yeah, Penske owns 51% of South by Southwest currently.
This is
So,
horrific news.
because of stuff like that, we're not seeing the level of experimentation. You're not seeing the discoverability. All these festivals have a degree by which they want to be, big for big Hollywood premieres and all this sort of stuff. So it's like, yeah, no, I don't see myself as like a DIY filmmaker finding a traditional route like festivals in order to get my movie discovered. I mean, let's look at it like this. It took until the third Castration movie for us to actually do a festival premiere as something that, at the end of the day, the movies don't need for their discoverability. It's the festivals are coming to us because they are realizing
Yeah,
they missed being part of the journey of a popular indie film.
yeah.
But, they had no interest initially to be part of the journey of a movie like this one. And,
Which
and
is
that's not to say because they didn't like the films. It's mostly because the movies were so long and they felt it was like a hard sell. Like I definitely did have
100. Yeah.
programmers who talked to me about it, but
It's
yeah,
the whole. I think part of the reason I have found film festivals so transformative in the past has been the platforming of films like this, where it's like 5 hours. Why not? Like I love film. This is what I'm here for. So I love. First off, that some people's first interaction with Michaela will be this latest chapter because it's like I am Michaela Defense Squad, like me and one other girl, like Michaela Defense Squad with like pickets, like walking around in circles. Although, like, no spoilers, but Michaela does take a bit of a I was going to say left turn, but it is, one might say, a right turn. A turn. She
I would
takes
call
it.
it a right turn for
Yeah,
sure.
it's certainly a turnabout. She does a little, we support women's wrongs, but I would say I wanted to get quickly into kind of how the castration films, because I was introduced to them through Vera Drew's Q&A last year at the People's Joker at Prince Charles. So I'm turning up because I'm a nerd and I love the Joker and I love Batman, and I'm going, there was a movie that was banned from TIFF and it's about that. And I'm like, let me go. And then I just like get socked in the face by Vera. And then she says, you have to go check out these movies by Louise. I'm like, okay, well, whenever I can get my hands on these, I can. And they just dropped on Letterboxd. For those of you who don't know it, you can get them on Gumroad and also on Letterboxd Video Store now. And so I binged most of them, like most of 1 and 2, just in one sitting. And first off, Michaela Defense Squad, but also to watch chapter 1 now, when we know what a clavicular is, feels really. I wanted to ask you, because I was also on the internet back in the day. I was on the Tumblr side of the Tumblr 4chan war. Like, I believe we were in opposition at that time, potentially.
I mean,
But
it's so funny because I always wanted, like, I always had the Tumblr 4chan relationship where I was like the 4chan boyfriend and I had the Tumblr girlfriend. And of course, both of us were closeted transgender.
Yes, it's tale as old as time. But I found the proliferation of this language into the mainstream. Like, people are saying looks maxing unironically,
Yeah.
fully in the mainstream. It's all just spilled out into regular discussions in pop culture. And suddenly, chapter 1, I was told by so many people, chapter 1, it's the incel chapter, it's really out there. And like, there's context in the latest chapter of the films that maybe makes our protagonist a little less sympathetic, but I will say it feels so much cushier now considering how far we have gone culturally.
Yeah.
It feels really genuinely heartfelt and sympathetic, which I believe was or empathetic, which I believe was part of your artistic
100%.
goal. How do you feel specifically with and you've said that each chapter informs the viewer of how to watch the next one. How do you feel now in this climate? I know, we make the art for the art and the climate is what it is. Now that was that chapter meant to feel more shocking for those who watched it at the time? Or was it genuinely meant to be that ramp up beyond which at the very end of the film maybe he becomes his worst self? I don't know.
Well, it's really interesting because I never set out for any of the content in this to be shocking, because to me, I was depicting something that felt really real, which is that
Right.
way in which the violent language which we use online is starting to inform the way that we talk to each other in real life. And these movies are very much so about A, the violence of language, and B, the way in which our real life sort of like connections with people have become so poisoned with the way that we take that sort of manner of speaking for granted on the internet. So, I mean, to get to our current era where, all these words are in the, being used in, where you can hear looks maxing on the news or whatever. I think that, like, that was definitely the way the tides were turning. I mean, like, especially in the United States, the media ecosystem is dominated by a presidency that is the Twitter presidency, It's like the Twitter administration. So, I mean, like, it was never like unexpected for us to move in these sorts of directions. I mean, especially when like, social media has become such a big platform for like publicity and the way people communicate with each other. So it is like a demographic or like, people who use the internet. It's all a post-COVID thing, right? Everyone was forced to go so online during the pandemic that now we brought all that stuff back with us into the real world. It was like everyone went foraging. We found all these terrible words like void and looks maxing and whatever, and now we've brought them back into the real world. So that was always like an inevitability. But in terms of that first chapter with the incel character and the exploration of like R9K and all of this, it was never meant to be shocking, and I think that for me, it was actually an attempt to present something much more realistically, where I mean, the starting of both of those two sort of characters, you could trace back to the sort of like self-mythologizing of like a 4chan green text post where it's like, oh, look at these things that happened to me, like, why is life so hard or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And, you could see whether it's a 4chan green text or a Reddit am I the asshole, or like any of these sorts of like ways in which like we distill like our sort of like life journeys and like worst moments into something that could be considered like content or whatever.
Yeah.
The movie, to me at least, I think, is trying to draw these parallels between the ways in which like, you know, all sorts of different people are like find these different ways to like self-harm using this sort of like ways, mannerisms of speaking and online community spaces and stuff that we pick up online. And so with the way that like the incel character, we see his arc and the way he communicates with people and the way there's that sort of interplay between his relationship to like 4chan and his real life is very similar to Michaela. And I don't think there's anything supposed to be like shocking or necessarily like confronting about like either of those characters or their like the way I compare their relationships to the online. I think it's just mostly to say like, hey, look at this shared humanity. And when I talk about that way of like watching the movie to learn new things between each chapter, where it's like teaching you how to watch the next one, I think that the way in which we draw those parallels in those first two chapters, and then like, you know, both of those chapters definitely echo in like the third and you know, next chapter. I think that to me, it's more so like starting with the incel character, that's so much so like a default archetype of cinema itself. The sort of like, you know, white cis-het man.
Yep.
Is very much so like our default cinematic protagonist. So starting with him and seeing him struggle in a way that then becomes similar to all these other characters, I think just sets the ground for us to like look at the lens of like a shared humanity across all of these people. So when you start with the, you know, this guy and then go to this trans woman, the fact that your mind is making those parallels, I think makes it easier to not like other the trans woman character. Like you're more so like, you know, I think there's like a lot definitely that can be convoluted in terms of like the way those processes work, and like if anyone's carrying bigotry with them or something, maybe that could inform their process by which they make that comparison. Or, you know, a lot of people might find it problematic to make a comparison between like an online trans space and online incel space, as if I'm saying incels and trans women are the same or something, which isn't really the point. It's more so just about the ways that we all equally are informed by this online language and the ways we build community both online and off, and you know, it's about existing in the modern day and finding a universal human experience within that more than anything. Yeah.
One of the most, like, I have to say this because the most universal theme you touched on, and I completely agree with all of that, and I feel much better now because I was watching it going, I love this, and this is like actually really profound, and actually I am everyone and everyone is me, and it felt very connecting. And especially in Polygon Heart Moda, this idea that sometimes you can found family that is just as toxic, maybe even as your real one, or can potentially be dangerous to you, felt very like, you know, what do I know about an experience of being a trans woman in a cult in the basement? I am, you know, a black girl in London, but the concept is universal. And the internet language as well, this I like the another mainstreaming, I would say, of like therapy speak as a weapon, which was really great to have on screen, because, you know, I'm not going to maybe get my normie friends to sit down for a 5-hour film, but to explain certain passages of this film to them, it helps so much. The thing where cinema helps you explain yourself to other people and see yourself, and etc. and so forth. I want to ask a quick nerdy question. How did you pull off the voice for, and I do want to ask about Junior Ghosts in a second, but that will be the spoiler bit just right at the end. How did you pull off the Polygon AI voice? Because I was vocally stimming to that all evening. I was like,
that's so funny.
Is conflict, is not abuse.
So that's the brainchild of one of our production designers, Sadie Meadow, who basically pitched me on making the AI, like how we would approach doing the whole AI. Like we definitely had the idea of like the face on the screen, the sort of Wizard of Oz component. Sadie is so good with all the technology stuff, which is like not my background at all. So she brought in like, okay, well, we can feed it a bunch of Hessa Denny's podcast that is all of her speaking, and then kind of just distort it and make a text-to-speech thing where we can like pull all the different sounds out of all, like, you know, like 50 podcast episodes. Actually, I think it was trained on like a lot less podcast episodes, so it would be jankier or something. I would have to ask Sadie like the exact process, but it was definitely intentionally meant to be like a very weird like simulacrum of human speech. And like I think that that like factors it. Like it was so funny working on that. Like that was all written in like I've always like in my career I've always had like a really long standing interest in like obviously the relationship between person and the computer or like the person like the way they communicate online. So having like the AI like LLM chatbot thing that's specific to this cult and just like repeats all the same things back to them and all these like therapy speak language, like all these ideas about like oh like all this like mindfulness talk and all this stuff that's like weaponized in this context. I thought was like very fun because it's like it's obviously it creates like a literal echo chamber by the ending
Yeah.
when it's like saying the conflict's not abused over and over again. But like to me, it's like such a fun way to like look at how like AI bots and stuff interact with online spaces and became like a very important way of like showing the internet as real life, which is like the sort of theme of that second part that Polygon Heart Murder is very much so like taking all the ways in which this like sort of online persona becomes like the fascist in your head,
Mm.
and then taking that literally and showing like oh well these people are recreating this structure that we can definitely see its parallels with like online communities and how it ends up becoming this like very patriarchal, dominating, fascist structure by the end of it, and like by the end you've literally got them holding up like the white male mask,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. I mean,
as their sort of like character that is guiding them or whatever. It's like
yeah.
we're it's not subtle like it's a cartoon, but I like doing stuff. It's fun. To me,
I
that
was
was a
gonna
fun movie
say,
to make.
I would have loved to get more into the fact because the first thing you research is it says Louise Ward is a filmmaker with a degree in film semiotics. I was like, that is her superpower because the way the every like there are of course the subtle things and we could get into the camcorder of it all and I'm sure you probably talked ad nauseum about that as a cinematic choice. But the fact that there is no fear in just going, yeah, I'm going to literally put the metaphor in. And it's just like, there you go, the white male mask, there it is. And I found that to be really refreshing because I think a lot of people try to couch their metaphors so far that like people aren't. I love the comedy of pushing it right to that edge and assuming people can just enjoy it at that point. Seeing as I only have 3 minutes left with you, I will just ask the final question, which is also tied to chapter 3 Junior Ghosts. So I'm assuming what we're saying is that anthology 2 is part 2, anthology 1 is chapters 1 and 2, because I was like, is Polygon Heart Mode chapter 3 or is Junior Ghosts chapter 3?
They're all I mean, we can. It's gonna be whatever it is. I mean, the thing that's funny about this project was like the whole anthology idea came about kind of by accident, like calling it Anthology 1, Anthology 2, was mostly because I was just trying to figure out how to talk, like part 1, part 2 seemed kind of weird to me because I didn't know if it would, once an audience saw that first movie that we were putting out, I didn't know if they would understand how, I don't know if they would like watch it in a way where they would compare the two stories, like through the context of chapter 1, chapter 2. So even though like to me, Castration movie as a whole is a movie that encompasses 5 chapters, but perhaps 3 chapter threes. It is the sort of interesting thing to me about using the anthology framing was to release that first movie like that. It would make people think that each story could be different, and then they'd be looking for the comparisons between them. And, I don't want to, like, give it too much away. By the time we get to Junior Ghosts, we suddenly realize that these are all very directly informed by each other. And
Yeah.
this is actually all one story that, we're now starting to see how all these things fit together. And I think that that's, like, one of the sort of fun things. Like not to spoil too much, but, you can draw... With Junior Ghosts, you can now draw a complete straight line between like the incel character breaking up with his girlfriend and Circle being rescued from the cult. Like it becomes one narrative through that chapter basically. So
I had chills. I like not to be a former MCU head about it, but it very much was Captain America with the in everyone coming. I was like, it's happening. It's happening. I loved the connections, and somehow made chapter 1, and again no spoilers, far more terrifying in a way, as a kind of a shadow of an empathy that had become something very else in some other people's lives, that just felt like ultimately the ultimate interconnectedness of all things that I think I've found so brilliant about the saga thus far. Trying to explain cinema of this magnitude and scope that is meant to be this kind of operatic odyssey through the lives of many different people and the knock-on effects of these things. It can be really hard to explain to a normie why they need to then invest that time. Like my cinephile friends, they will sit down and they will watch what I give them. For normie cinephile audiences, specifically the ones that may be finding Chapter 3 Junior Ghosts at BFI Flair for the first time, the media literacy situation right now is not great. What's one thing you hope that they think about more after watching maybe the first few chapters, if they ever do, or specifically chapter? I mean, if you're coming in with Junior Ghosts, you haven't done any of the empathy up ramp. You're just going straight into turf.
Well, I think that by the end of each of these chapters, I just want people to think like, God, I gotta be nicer to people.
Yeah.
Like, I think that that's really like, or like the takeaway from these movies is like, even if you were someone who is like the worst sort of gender critical, I think that like watching the way that like Izzy and Tiffany slash Trent are in that chapter is one of those things where it's like it's hard to watch, it hurts to watch, and I think that the takeaway is maybe like, man, this would be so much better if they could communicate more
Yeah.
effectively or be nice or actually try to like listen to each other, to empathize with each other. Because like I think that the magic trick I was trying to pull off with that movie is I think that obviously you'll come in with whatever baggage you have based on your pre-existing politics and identity, but like what we were really trying to do is directing both Henry Gillespie and Evelyn Fass. It was like I want these characters to be kind of like equally right in a way, and that was like the really tough thing that we were trying to pull off with it. And obviously the final scene does push Izzy over the edge to kind of say the politics of like, yeah, no, this is bad actually.
Yes.
But like at the same time, like I think that up until that moment, I really want you to be like, yeah, well, I mean, like maybe Tiffany should be more considerate or something like this. Like it is something that is like I think a lot messier in terms of like where your empathy might align throughout that story, and you might be surprised with which character you're, more aligned with in certain moments.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that like it is like regardless of where you come in, that empathy exercise I think is always gonna be at play, and like that general takeaway of like, hey, try to be nicer to people. But I do think you're right that like, in comparison to like the first chapter, which is like kind of such an easy on ramp,
Yeah.
this one is like it just drops you right into it.
And especially in a time where we are in a time where, as if I know that the art kind of exists in this awesome pocket of not, but it is informed partially by the conversation being had around it. And
Yeah,
I
totally.
think it's almost melodrama in a time like this, especially on Turf Island, to just drop people into that conversation and force them to have to find that empathy.
Yeah.
With that, I mean, certainly for me, watching Avalon's character, like I knew she was so wrong, but I could empathize with the speed she felt the world was going, and it's weird that I just watched this after watching a TikTok of a woman go viral basically saying the same thing, where she was just like, I had this awful reaction to what was my husband coming out to me, and it felt like it came out of nowhere. And of course, like up until that final moment, I was like, this is a genuine, I can understand why she is upset, not to the level that she was upset, but I can understand what that
Yeah.
reaction is. And then I don't want to spoil anything, but that final line, I'm like, wow, okay, sis, pack it up.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I think it is important. Like we're obviously not going to spoil the ending, but like, I think it is important with each of these movies. Like, especially like the part two. You like it's like I don't think you're going to come away from that movie thinking like, oh, detransition is really good or whatever. It's like there's like very complicated nuance to these things, and
Yeah.
with part three, it's like you have this like character who gets radicalized into like this like position of like gender critical like turfism, and I really wanted to understand what made that character tick in order to like get her to that place. But, we have to end in a place where it's obvious that, that ideal, like the end point of that ideology is also like a death cult in the same way that any of these sorts of characters find themselves in, like the incel, like all of these characters end up in a place where it's the projection of the sort of like self, their feelings of like lack of agency, their fear, the ways in which they feel persecuted in whatever abstract way, then become pushed onto like the other, where it's like
Uh-huh.
I want violence towards the other, and that's what we find all these characters kind of ending up in this place of like, I guess, this sort of like and like existential revenge or something.
Yeah.
Like I want revenge against the world, so I'm gonna take it out on those like less fortunate than me or something. So like
And then,
I
yeah.
yeah.
And I noticed, I mean, literally circle. Like I noticed the circles of, and the interconnectedness once we get to the latest part of the saga feels to me like I was vindicated as I was watching everything up until that point. I was like, oh, the knock-on effects of the cycles of like generational harm that have happened, and just the internal, sorry, the external pressure of existing in a world that has not had to acknowledge or respect certain
Yeah.
groups of people over and over and over. And I particularly feel that cycle with Michaela, especially in the latest part, but certainly in Anthology 1, where I just feel that all that she is doing is of previous versions of herself that she's still following the momentum
Yes,
of.
100%.
And so the fact that the next character we follow is literally called Circle, I was just like, I
Yes.
read the film correctly, but also that Circle herself, himself, is following a momentum of already having had a negative experience within kind of trans community, but more so that there is so much more overwhelming societal pressure to not be trans, that momentum can sometimes, it's a very complicated situation. And like I found that scene, and I'm gonna forget absolutely every character's name, but that scene in that bedroom with Ivy and Circle and the random straight girl from Canada that's visiting.
Yes, and then,
Like,
and then Brody, our detransition
yeah, I
character.
found that intensely like obviously profound, but like also I felt the grief
Yeah.
existing between Circle and Brody in that scene as just being like, it was neither of them were talking, and there was a lot of yappa yappa yappa, but neither of them were talking about the grief that had been acknowledged in that moment, and
Yeah.
everyone was just pushing back towards boy. And I think even as someone who's not had the experience of being trans, that moment hit me in a way I don't think it would have if I hadn't spent so much time with these characters. And I think that's what's transformative about the films. I'm just now just telling you how amazing you are.
Well, thank you. No, I mean, like, I do think, I mean, like, all these characters are in that sort of like cycle of samsara or something, right? Like
Yes.
there, it is all very cyclical stories, and it is all like, I don't know. I guess that's, I mean, it's funny because like we talk about the dire sort of media literacy, like where how dire it feels with like audiences not being able to pick up on stuff, and like that's one of the things I kind of enjoy about the castration movies is there's sort of like different levels by which like like the surface level is sort of like almost like the cartoonish like very literal imagery to pick
Yeah.
up on, and then like you can start digging deeper and start finding like getting to find these parallels and stuff. Like it'll be a very fun movie someday if someone writes like the philosophy of castration movie, and it's
They
like
may.
a nice little like book that's trying to link all this stuff together. I think that there's something about the movie, and like it my striving to make it like kind of this work that's like about everything in a way, but finding a way to make everything within this very specific story and environment, and like like really linking it to this small group of characters. I mean, there's a castration movie already has like well over 100 characters in it, but like trying to focus on the protagonists or something and how important they all are to this world. I think yeah, I think it'll be a by the time it's all done, I'm really hoping that all those themes we're kind of setting up and all these ideas like really pull together in a strong way.
And speaking to structure, and then I promise I will leave you alone. Speaking to structure, to the extent to which I know you've said you have quite a free filming experience where you just turn up to locations, you
Yeah.
have your plan, you have your characters. Have you found that as things have grown from the kind of original 90-minute idea into the kind of saga, that you have some kind of major Bible sitting on a desk somewhere that's just like filled with notes? Or is it all, are you just literally a savant that has it all in your head?
It's a
I can
mix.
believe both.
It's a mix for sure. Like when we did part two, for example,
Mm.
like Polygon Heart Motor, like almost the entire thing was just in my head. Like I didn't refer to anything else. It was just like, let's just go shoot this stuff. But then with the overall Castration movie, I do have like a lore Bible, which is like, but it's like freeform. It's not in order or anything. It's just like every idea put in it, like in the order in which I had it.
Yeah.
And I will say that like as we've gone farther along in the process, like I've started like writing more scenes and whatever. There was one scene that is for the fourth part that is a scene between me and Abigail Thorne's character, Germaine.
The Abigail? Are we talking about
Yes.
the Abigail? No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm simply gonna pass away. Are you joking?
Yeah.
Like, I thought I was gonna pass away when I saw Felix Biederman, and I was like,
No, if you're someone who has been like, you know, like terminally online and loves online stuff, you're always gonna have new surprises in Castration movie. But like it was a scene that like me and the comic book artist Rummy Boydell co-wrote together, where we actually like wrote a scene as a traditional screenplay because I had this idea for this like really huge like 8-page monologue that I wanted Abigail to do, and so I ended up going like, you know what, like people like like it's the sort of thing of like responding to the moment with Castration movies. Like, you know, we've done so much in this very improvised style with these actors and everything, and I always want to try to like challenge myself as we like shoot every new scene to be like, how can I approach this differently than we've done everything before it? And that was like a big part of like Polygon Heart Motor was like, can we do something that's totally different from those first 2 chapters that we finished? And like we had actually shot Junior Ghosts as the third chap. Like we shot that right after we were done Trap Swan Princess.
wow.
And so we've been sitting on Junior Ghosts for over a year now.
Wow.
And is now finally seeing the light of day. But the thing is, like Junior Ghosts, it feels so similar to those first 2 chapters. It was
Yes.
like, let's go finish shooting Polygon Heart Motor because it's going to feel so different and can kind of open up like what this project can be for the audience watching it. They can see that this can be in different like there's different worlds within Castration movie that we're all going to be exploring. But
And I love that there is also a evolution of structure and medium, in the sense that you said that this is also meant to be a series, odyssey of everything. Like you're
Yeah.
trying to cover everything through the scope of, and so in the same way, almost in terms of filmic language and filmic
Yes.
approach, you're doing the same thing.
Well, and that's the thing is like we've filmed certain sections on film going towards the ending. So there's stuff that we've shot on 16mm film. You know, there's so many different tricks and whatever that we want to do with this to like, you know, like make it. I guess tricks isn't the right word. I mean tricks in the sense that all cinema is a magic trick, but like, you know, like trying to use different forms and you know, part of that is like, you know, writing a scene in a traditional way where we wrote this 8-page monologue for Abby.
8-page monologue.
So it's like,
I'm gonna lose my
Yeah.
mind. I'm gonna lose my mind. This is gonna be so awesome. Oh, I'm so sad. I'm very much, very, very, very much looking forward to that. You've now like my mind has been blown. I can't wait to see it. I absolutely adore Junior Ghosts. If anyone is watching this before its screenings at Flair, good luck getting a ticket. It's sold out both nights. But I'm very much looking forward to its release, and also let us know how we can let everyone know when that's out. And yeah, thank you for these films. I feel very energized by their existence, not just as a narrative, but also as a project getting out into the world, distribution-wise and everything. So yeah, thank you, and
Yeah.
you're a genius.
well, no, thank you so much. And just for like anyone in the audience who's like watching this, like just to loop everything back to that first question. I mean, like I just want people to know that like, you know, this project wasn't like made in a vacuum. It wasn't just like something that I decided one day I'm going to wake up and make Castration movie. This was like the culmination of, you know, collaborating with a huge group of incredible artists who I've become friends with by like also doing my own art over like 10 years of like, you know, starting with like my little short films and you know, interviewing people about their work and going to film festivals like Flair and like making those connections and you know, like trying to figure out and hone what my artistic voice was going to be. And you know, it took me 10 years, and now, like, you know, then I made the first Castration movie in 2022, and now here we are in 2026. I'm still somehow still working on Castration movie. But like, I just think that for anyone who's like, you know, like even beyond just like getting to go out and experience cool art like this with a group of people, I think that for anyone who's like a budding artist or it wants to be involved in, like, you know, cool art in general, it's like, go find your art community, go like do whatever you can to hone your voice. And yeah, so just thank you so much for having me on here. I just love getting to share stuff about these movies. So
I
thank
really
you.
appreciate your time, Louise. Thank you so much. Yeah, amazing way to end it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I shall stop